woman needs to seduce the powerful boss to save her husband, and the ending is surprising. Click subscribe to discover more thrilling stories like this one and avoid 10 years of bad luck in love. Sarah Thompson watched helplessly as police officers escorted her husband, Jack, out of their home. Tears streamed down her cheeks as he looked at her, with a mixture of desperation and confusion in his eyes. "Sarah, I swear I'm innocent," Jack cried as they pushed him into the police car. "Someone set me up." Sarah nodded, unable to speak due to the lump in her throat. As the car drove away, a fierce determination took hold of her. No matter what it cost, she was going to prove her husband's innocence. The following days were a whirlwind of visits to lawyers, statements to the press, and sleepless nights. Sarah pored over the case documents again and again, looking for any clue that could exonerate Jack. It was during one of these endless nights that she found something, a reference to Eagle Corporation, the company where Jack had worked before being accused of money laundering. With eyes narrowed from exhaustion, Sarah began to investigate the company. The more she read, the more convinced she became that the key to freeing her husband lay there. However, accessing the information she needed seemed impossible. It was then that a bold and dangerous plan occurred to her. "If I can't get that information from the outside," she muttered to herself, "I'll have to do it from the inside." The next day, Sarah stood in front of the mirror, almost unrecognizable. Her long brown hair had been cut and dyed platinum blonde. Her brown eyes were hidden behind blue contact lenses, and her face was carefully made up to alter her features. "From today on," she told herself, "I am Olivia Parker." With her new identity, Sarah presented herself at Eagle Corporation's offices for a job interview. Thanks to a carefully fabricated resume and her natural charisma, she soon found herself working as an executive assistant in the company. Her goal was clear: to get close to Nathan Bradley, the powerful and charismatic CEO of the corporation. Sarah was convinced that he had the answers she needed to exonerate Jack weeks past, and Olivia quickly gained a reputation for efficiency and discretion. Nathan began to trust her with increasingly important tasks, and Sarah felt she was one step closer to her goal. However, as she spent more time with Nathan, Sarah found herself struggling with unexpected feelings. The CEO wasn't the ruthless villain she had imagined. He was intelligent, compassionate, and, to her surprise, incredibly attractive one night. As they worked late in the office, Nathan looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Olivia," he said softly, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't help feeling drawn to him. At that moment, she realized that her mission had become complicated in a way she had never anticipated. As she left the office that night, Sarah reminded herself why she was there. "I can't forget Jack," she said firmly to herself. "No matter what I feel, I have to go ahead with the plan." But even as she told herself this, a part of her wondered if she would be able to maintain control of her emotions in the dangerous game she was playing. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Sarah, under her facade as Olivia Parker, had become an indispensable figure at Eagle Corporation. Her efficiency and dedication did not go unnoticed, especially by Nathan Bradley. One Friday afternoon, Nathan called her to his office. Sarah entered, her heart beating with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Had he discovered her true identity? "Olivia," Nathan said, his voice soft but authoritative, "I have a proposal for you." Sarah held her breath, preparing for the worst. "I want you to be my personal assistant," he continued. "I trust you more than anyone in this company. What do you say?" Relief flooded Sarah, quickly followed by a wave of excitement. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. "It would be an honor, Mr. Bradley," she responded with a carefully rehearsed smile. Nathan stood up from his desk and approached her. "Please call me Nathan," he said, taking her hand. "I think we're going to be working very closely from now on." The touch of his hand sent an electric current through Sarah's body. She forced herself to maintain her composure, reminding herself that this was part of the plan. As they spent more time together, Sarah found herself struggling more and more with her feelings. Nathan was attentive, brilliant, and surprisingly vulnerable when they were alone. She found herself longing for their conversations, eagerly anticipating every moment they spent together. One night, as they worked, late on an important project, Nathan looked at her with an intensity that left her breathless. "Olivia," he murmured, moving closer to her, "I can't keep denying what I feel for you." Before Sarah could react, Nathan's lips were on hers. The kiss was passionate, urgent, and for a moment Sarah lost herself in it. But then Jack's image appeared in her mind, and she pulled away abruptly. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to catch her breath. I need some air." Sarah ran out of the office, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, her heart was racing from Nathan's kiss. On the other, guilt was consuming her. How could she betray Jack like this? That night, as she lay awake in her bed, Sarah went over her plan. She was closer than ever to obtaining the information she needed to free Jack. But the emotional cost was proving to be greater than she had anticipated. "It's just an act," she told herself. "I can't lose sight of my goal." However, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "What if it's not just an act? What if you're really falling in love with Nathan?" Sarah shook her head, trying to rid herself of these thoughts. She couldn't afford to. Doubt now Jack needed her, and she wasn't going to fail him. Meanwhile, in prison, Jack looked out the small window of his cell. Months had passed. Since he had last seen Sarah, the visits had become less frequent, and although she always assured him she was working on his release, he couldn't help feeling that something had changed. "I miss you, Sarah," he whispered into the night. "Please don't forget me." Back in her apartment, Sarah made a decision. She was going to accelerate her plan. The sooner she obtained the information she needed, the sooner she could get out of this impossible situation. What she didn't know was that her actions had caught the attention of someone else at Eagle Corporation. Someone who suspected that Olivia Parker wasn't who she claimed to be. As Sarah delved deeper into her role as Olivia and her relationship with Nathan, the world around her began to subtly change. The hallways of Eagle Corporation, once filled with friendly smiles and cordial greetings, now seemed to harbor suspicious glances and whispers behind her back. Emily Reeves, the head of security for the company, had begun to closely observe the CEO's new personal assistant. Something about Olivia didn't add up, and Emily was determined to find out what it was. One morning, as Sarah entered the office, she noticed that her desk had been ransacked. Nothing seemed to be missing, but she had the unmistakable feeling that someone had been searching for something. With her heart racing, she quickly checked her secret files, hidden in a false compartment of her drawer. She sighed in relief to find them intact. "Good morning, Olivia." Emily's voice startled her. "Is everything all right?" Sarah turned, quickly composing a smile. "Of course, Emily. Do you need anything?" Emily's eyes scrutinized her intensely. "Just passing by to say hello, by the way. Which university did you say you graduated from?" "State University," Sarah responded without hesitation, repeating the information from her fake resume. Emily nodded slowly. "Interesting. I have a friend who works there. Maybe I'll ask him about you." Before Sarah could respond, Nathan appeared in the hallway. "Olivia, I need you in my office now." Grateful for the interruption, Sarah hurried to follow Nathan, feeling Emily's gaze fixed on her back. Once in the privacy of Nathan's office, Sarah allowed herself to relax a bit, but the expression on Nathan's face immediately put her on alert. "Olivia," he began, his voice tense, "I need you to be completely honest with me." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Of course, Nathan. What's going on?" He stared at her for a moment before continuing. "Some confidential documents have disappeared. Documents that only you and I had access to." Sarah felt the floor open up beneath her feet. She knew exactly which documents Nathan was talking about. She had copied them the night before, believing they contained the information she needed to exonerate Jack. I don't know anything about that," she lied, hating herself for every word. Nathan moved closer to her, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, I trust you more than anyone. If you know something, anything. Please tell me." Guilt and love intermingled in Sarah's chest. For a moment, she was on the verge of confessing everything, but the image of Jack alone in his cell stopped her. "I'm sorry, Nathan," she said softly. "I can't help you with this." Something changed in Nathan's eyes. He let go of her hands and stepped away, his posture rigid. "I understand," he said coldly. "You may go." Sarah left the office on shaky legs. She knew she had just crossed a point of no return. She had to act quickly. That night, as she reviewed the documents in the safety of her apartment, Sarah made a shocking discovery. The transactions that had led to Jack's accusation were not only fraudulent, but they pointed to a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of Eagle Corporation. And at the center of it all was a name that made Sarah's heart stop: Nathan Bradley. The revelation hit her like a punch to the stomach. The man she was falling in love with was responsible for her husband's unjust imprisonment. As she struggled to process this information, Sarah's phone rang. It was an unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered. "We know who you really are, Sarah Thompson," said a distorted voice. "If you want your husband to stay alive, you'll bring all the documents you've stolen to the address we'll send you by message. You have 24 hours. The call cut off, leaving Sarah in deafening silence. Her cover had been blown, and now not only her life was in danger, but Jack's as well. With her heart racing and her mind working at full speed, Sarah realized that the moment of truth had arrived. She had to make a decision that would change the course of her life forever. Would she hand over the documents and abandon her mission to save Jack? Or would she risk everything to expose the truth and confront Nathan and the real criminals behind Eagle Corporation? As the night wore on, Sarah began to formulate a desperate plan. She knew she was about to embark on the most dangerous game of her life, and that the consequences of her actions would be irreversible. Dawn found Sarah sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by documents and with eyes reddened by lack of sleep. She had spent the entire night analyzing the information she had gathered, looking for a way out of the labyrinth she found herself in. The documents she had copied from Nathan's office were a goldmine of incriminating information. They not only proved Jack's innocence, but also revealed a network of corruption that extended far beyond Eagle Corporation politicians, judges, high-level businessmen. They were all implicated in a money laundering scheme that made the accusation against her husband seem insignificant. Sarah ran a trembling hand through her hair. She had less than 20 hours to make a decision that would change the course of many lives, including her own. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was the promised address from the mysterious voice, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Her heart skipped a beat as she thought of Jack, alone and vulnerable in his cell. Would they really kill him if she didn't hand over the documents? But handing over the documents would mean giving up the only chance to prove Jack's innocence, and worse still, it would mean letting the real criminals go free. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to think, what would Jack do in her place? The answer came clear as day. He would do the right thing regardless of the personal cost. With renewed determination, Sarah began to devise a plan. She wasn't going to play by the criminals' rules. She was going to change the game entirely. First, she made copies of all the documents and hid them in several secure locations. Then, she sent encrypted copies to several trusted journalists with instructions to publish them if anything happened to her. Next, she called her old college friend, now a police detective, Michael Carter. "Mike, I need your help," she said as soon as he answered. "I have information about a corruption network involving Eagle Corporation and several important figures, but my life and my husband's are in danger." After a long conversation, they agreed on a plan. Michael would gather a trusted team to intervene at the warehouse meeting. With that settled, Sarah faced the most difficult task: confronting Nathan. She arrived at the office earlier than usual, her heart pounding as she waited for Nathan's arrival. When he entered, he looked at her with a mixture of suspicion and concern. "Olivia, what are you doing here so early?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We need to talk, Nathan," and not as Olivia Parker, your assistant, but as Sarah Thompson, Jack Thompson's wife. The color drained from Nathan's face. For a moment, it seemed he was going to call security, but something in Sarah's gaze stopped him. "Explain yourself," he finally said, closing his office door. For the next hour, Sarah told him everything. How she had assumed a false identity to infiltrate the company, how she had discovered the truth about the corruption network, and how now her life and Jack's were in danger. "I know it was you who orchestrated all of this, Nathan," Sarah concluded. "But I also know you're not a monster. I saw your humanity, your compassion. You still have time to do the right thing." Nathan collapsed into his chair, the weight of his actions reflected on his face. "Sarah, I'm sorry, I never meant for things to go this far. It started as a way to increase the company's profits, but it got out of control. And when your husband started asking questions, you decided to use him as a scapegoat," Sarah finished for him. Nathan nodded, ashamed. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to confess," Sarah said firmly, "to help expose the entire network. It's the only way to keep Jack safe, and possibly to save your own soul." Nathan stared at her for a long moment. "And us? What I felt, what I feel for you, was it all a lie?" Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "Not everything was a lie, Nathan, but my heart belongs to Jack. It always has." Finally, Nathan nodded. "All right, I'll do what you ask, but we'll need a plan." As the sun rose over the city, Sarah and Nathan began to plot a strategy to unmask the corruption and confront the real villains. Time was running against them, and they knew danger lurked around every corner. But for the first time in months, Sarah felt that truth and justice were within her reach. However, she couldn't help but wonder, what would be the final cost of her victory? The clock struck 11:30 a.m. when Sarah and Nathan left Eagle Corporation. They had less than 5 hours before the meeting at the abandoned warehouse, and every minute counted. "Ah, you sure we can trust your police friend?" Nathan asked as they hurried towards the courthouse. Sarah nodded. "Mike is one of the good ones. He'll handle security at the warehouse. We need to focus on getting the court order to release Jack." Thanks to Nathan's signed confession and the mountain of evidence Sarah had collected, they managed to convince a judge to issue an immediate release order for Jack. However, they knew the real criminals wouldn't sit idly by. As they headed to the prison, Sarah's phone rang. It was Emily Reeves, Eagle Corporation's head of security. "I know what you're doing," Emily said without preamble, "and I want to help. I always suspected something wasn't right in the company, but I could never prove it." Sarah looked at Nathan, who nodded slowly. "All right, Emily, we need all the help we can get. Meet us at the state prison in 30 minutes. At 2:45 p.m., Sarah, Nathan, Emily, and a newly released Jack found themselves in a police van heading towards the abandoned warehouse. The reunion between Sarah and Jack had been bittersweet, filled with tears, hugs, and hurried explanations. "So, you fell in love with him?" Jack asked quietly. Looking at Nathan, Sarah took her husband's hand. "I fell in love with the idea of him, with the person I thought he was. But you're the love of my life, Jack." "Never doubt that." Nathan, overhearing the conversation, felt a pang of pain, but remained focused on the task ahead. At 3:55 p.m., they arrived at the warehouse. Michael and his team were already in position, hidden and ready to act. "Remember the plan," Sarah said. "I go in alone with the documents, you wait for the signal." Jack grabbed her arm. "Be careful, please." Sarah gave him a quick kiss before exiting the van. The interior of the warehouse was dark and dusty. In the center, under the dim light of a solitary bulb, stood a hooded figure. "Do you have the documents?" the figure asked in a distorted voice. Sarah stepped forward, holding a folder. "I have them. But before I hand them over, I want to know who's really behind all this." The figure laughed. "You're brave, Sarah Thompson, or maybe just stupid." Suddenly, the warehouse lights came on, revealing a dozen armed men surrounding Sarah. The hooded man removed his hood, revealing the face of Victor Bradley, Nathan's father and chairman of Eagle Corporation's board of directors. "I should have known my son wouldn't have the guts to handle this," Victor said with disdain. "He always was weak." Sarah remained calm, despite her racing heart. "You're the one who's weak, Mr. Bradley, hiding behind money and power, ruining innocent lives to line your pockets." Victor approached. Her, his face contorted with anger. "Hand over those documents now." At that moment, Sarah shouted, "Now!" Chaos erupted in the warehouse. Michael and his team burst in through all the entrances, while Nathan, Jack, and Emily entered through the main door. Amidst the confusion, Victor tried to flee, but Sarah chased after him. She caught up to him just as he was about to get into a car. "It's over, Victor," Sarah said, pointing a gun she had taken from one of the fallen guards at him. Victor looked at her with a mixture of hatred and respect. "You're an extraordinary woman, Sarah. It's a shame you're on the wrong side." "No," she replied. "I'm exactly where I should be." Minutes later, Victor Bradley was handcuffed and taken away by the police along with his accomplices. The corruption network he had woven over years was crumbling before his eyes as sirens wailed and camera flashes from journalists illuminated the scene. Sarah found herself in the center of a group hug with Jack, Nathan, and Emily. "We did it," she whispered, tears of relief running down her cheeks. But as the dust settled and the adrenaline began to dissipate, Sarah realized this was just the beginning. They had won the battle, but the war to rebuild their lives was only just beginning. The days following the dramatic capture of Victor Bradley and the dismantling of the corruption network were a whirlwind of police statements, press conferences, and endless meetings with lawyers. The story of Sarah, Jack, and Nathan became a national sensation, occupying the front pages of every newspaper and leading newscast. Sarah suddenly found herself in the spotlight, hailed as a heroine by some, and criticized as a manipulator by others. The media pressure was intense, and she often found herself longing for the relative simplicity of her previous life. A week after the events at the warehouse, Sarah and Jack sat in their living room, trying to process everything that had happened. "I still can't believe you did all that for me," Jack said, taking Sarah's hand. "You risked so much." Sarah gave him a tired smile. "I'd do anything for you, Jack, but I have to be honest with you about something." Jack looked at her, a shadow of concern crossing his face. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "During my time as Olivia, I developed feelings for Nathan. I never acted on them, and I always loved you, but..." Jack let go of her hand and stood up, walking to the window. The silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I suspected as much. The way you look at him, how you talk about him. Do you still love him?" Sarah stood up and approached him. "I love you, Jack. It's always been you. What I felt for Nathan, it was complicated and confusing, but you're my husband, my partner, the man I want to spend the rest of my life with." Jack turned to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I believe you, Sarah, but we need time to heal, to rebuild our trust." Sarah nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. "I know we'll do whatever it takes." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Nathan Bradley faced his own demons. Although his cooperation with the authorities had kept him out of jail, his reputation was in ruins, and Eagle Corporation was teetering on the brink of collapse. Sitting in his empty office, Nathan stared out the window, lost in thought. The sound of the door opening snapped him out of his reverie. "Emily, what are you doing here?" he asked, surprised to see the former head of security. Emily approached, her expression a mixture of compassion and determination. "I came to see how you were doing, and to make you a proposal." Nathan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of proposal?" "I want us to rebuild Eagle Corporation," Emily said. "From scratch, clean and transparent. No corruption, no deception. A company we can be proud of." Nathan looked at Emily in amazement. "Are you serious? After everything that's happened, you still think it's possible?" Emily sat down across from him, her gaze firm and determined. "Yes, I do. You made mistakes, Nathan, but you also showed courage in the end. You helped unmask your own father's corruption. That counts for something." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, visibly exhausted. "I don't know if I have the strength to start over, Emily. I've lost so much: the company, my reputation, Sarah." At the mention of Sarah's name, his voice broke slightly, Emily noticed, and leaned forward, placing a hand on his... Listen, Nathan. I know you have feelings for Sarah, but she's chosen Jack. You have to let her go and focus on rebuilding your life. Nathan looked at her, surprised by her frankness. How can you have so much faith in me after everything I've done? Emily smiled softly. Because I saw the man behind the facade of the ruthless CEO. I saw your internal struggle, your desire to do the right thing. I believe that together we can create something good from the ashes of Eagle Corporation. For the first time in weeks, Nathan felt a spark of hope. Okay, he said finally, let's do it, but on one condition. What's that? Emily asked. I want you to be the CEO. I'll work with you, but I need someone with your integrity in charge. Emily seemed surprised for a moment, but then nodded. With determination, agreed, we'll do this together. As Nathan and Emily began to make plans for the future, across town, Sarah and Jack faced their own challenges. The couple had decided to attend couples therapy to work on the issues that had arisen during Jack's absence, and Sarah's undercover mission sitting in Dr. Martinez's office. They both felt nervous, but determined to save their marriage. Sarah, Jack, Dr. Martinez began, you've been through an extraordinary experience that has tested your relationship in ways most couples never face. Can you tell me how you're feeling right now? Jack was the first to speak. I feel grateful for what Sarah did for me, but also hurt and confused. It's hard to process everything that happened while I was in prison. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. I understand that, Jack, and I feel guilty about the feelings I developed for Nathan. Even though I never stopped loving you, I want us to go back to what we were, but I don't know if it's possible. Dr. Martinez looked at them with empathy. What you're feeling is normal, given the circumstances. Trust and communication will be key to rebuilding your relationship, Sarah. Can you explain to Jack exactly how you felt during your undercover mission? Sarah took a deep breath and looked Jack in the eyes. Every day was a struggle, Jack. I was playing a role, living a lie, all to save you. And in the midst of that, I met a man who seemed to understand me, who made me feel valued and appreciated. I developed feelings for him, yes, but they were never as deep as what I feel for you. You're my home, Jack. You always have been. Jack listened in silence, his eyes bright with contained emotion. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. I appreciate your honesty, Sarah. I can't say it doesn't hurt to hear this, but I understand the circumstances were extraordinary. I had to face my own demons in prison, moments when I doubted everything and everyone, but I never stopped loving you. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. This is an excellent start. The honesty and vulnerability you're showing are fundamental to the healing process. In the coming sessions, we'll work on rebuilding trust and processing the traumas you've both experienced. As the session continued, Sarah and Jack began to feel that despite the obstacles, there was hope for their future. Together, the road would be long and difficult, but they were committed to walking it together. As they left Dr. Martinez's office, Sarah received a text message from Emily. We need to talk. It's about Nathan and the future of the company. Sarah looked at Jack, who had noticed her worried expression. Everything okay? He asked. Sarah hesitated for a moment before responding. It's Emily. She wants to talk about Nathan and the company. Do you mind if I meet with her? Jack seemed to struggle internally for a moment before nodding. Go ahead, I trust you, Sarah, but please keep me informed. Sarah gave him a soft kiss. I will, I love you, Jack. As Sarah headed to her meeting with Emily, she couldn't help feeling that she was about to face another twist in her already complicated life. What new challenges awaited her, and how would they affect her newly renewed relationship with Jack? Sarah arrived at the cafe where she was to meet Emily, her mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. As she entered, she spotted Emily sitting at a corner table, 2 steaming cups of coffee in front of her. Thanks for coming, Emily said, as Sarah sat down. I know you must be busy. With everything? Sarah nodded, taking a sip of coffee. What's this about, Emily? Is Nathan okay? Emily smiled slightly. He's struggling, but that's part of what I wanted to discuss with you. We've decided to rebuild Eagle Corporation, make it clean and transparent. Sarah raised her eyebrows, surprised. Really? That's ambitious. It is, Emily nodded. And this is where you come in, Sarah. We want you to be part of this. Your intelligence, your integrity, your determination. They're exactly what we need to do this, right? Sarah leaned back in her chair, processing the proposal. I don't know what to say, Emily. I just spent months pretending to be someone I'm not in that company. I'm not sure I can go back. Emily leaned forward, her gaze intense. I understand that, Sarah. But think about it. You have the opportunity to do things right this time, to create something positive from all this chaos. Plus, Nathan needs you. At the mention of Nathan's name, Sarah felt a pang of guilt and confusion. Emily, I know you love Jack, Emily interrupted gently. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, but Nathan respects you, trusts you. Your presence could be crucial to his rehabilitation. Sarah remained silent for a moment, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Finally, she spoke. I need time to think about it, and I have to talk to Jack. Emily nodded, understanding. Of course, take all the time you need. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Jack was in a meeting with his lawyer, discussing the details of his case and the compensation he would receive for his unjust imprisonment. Mr. Thompson, said the lawyer, given the circumstances of your case and the exposure of corruption at Eagle Corporation, we're in a strong position to negotiate substantial compensation. However, there's something else you should know. Jack straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. What is it? The lawyer pulled an envelope from his briefcase. This arrived at my office this morning. It's an offer from Nathan Bradley. He wants to hire you as a principal consultant in the rebuilding of Eagle Corporation. Jack took the envelope with trembling hands. What? Why would he do that? According to the letter, Mr. Bradley believes your unique experience and perspective would be invaluable in the process of transforming the company. He also mentions that it's a form of additional compensation and an opportunity for redemption for both of you. Jack stared at the envelope, his mind spinning. The idea of working alongside the man who had been part of the system that unjustly imprisoned him was surreal and... Yet what do you think? Jack asked his lawyer. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, considering carefully. From a legal standpoint, it's a solid offer. From a personal standpoint, well, that depends entirely on you, Mr. Thompson. Jack nodded slowly, tucking the envelope into his jacket. Thank you, I need to talk about this with Sarah. That night, Sarah and Jack sat in their living room, each holding a glass of wine, the air charged with tension and possibilities. So they offered you a job at Eagle Corporation, said Sarah, breaking the silence. Jack looked at her, surprised. How did you know? Emily told me, Sarah replied. They offered me a position too. They looked at each other, a mix of emotions crossing their faces. What do you think? Jack asked softly. Sarah took a sip of wine before answering. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to get away from all this, start over somewhere where no one knows us. But another part wants to be part of the change. Jack finished for her. Sarah nodded. Exactly. And you? What do you think about Nathan's offer? Jack ran a hand through his hair, sighing. It's complicated. Part of me wants to reject it outright after everything that happened. But another part thinks it could be a unique opportunity to do things right, to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. They remained silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke. Jack, if we decide to do this, we have to do it together. As a team. No secrets, no lies. Do you think we can do that? Jack looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. I think we can do anything together, Sarah. We've been through hell and back. This could be our chance to create something good out of all that chaos. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She put down her wine glass and moved closer to Jack, taking his hands in hers. I love you, Jack. Whatever happens, it will always be you and me against the world. Jack pulled her close, kissing her softly. You and me against the world, he repeated as they embraced. They both knew they were about to embark on a new chapter in their lives. One full of challenges, no doubt, but also of possibilities. The opportunity to heal, to grow, and to make a real difference in the world. The next morning, Sarah called Emily. We're in. she said simply. On the other end of the line, Emily smiled. "Excellent. We start on Monday." As she hung up the phone, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Together, she and Jack would face whatever came. And maybe, just maybe, they could help create something truly special from the ashes of their past. Monday morning arrived faster than Sarah and Jack had expected. They found themselves standing in front of the imposing Eagle Corporation building, their hands intertwined, taking deep breaths to calm their nerves. "Are you ready?" Jack asked, giving Sarah's hand a gentle squeeze. She looked at him, a small smile on her lips. "With you by my side, I'm ready for anything." They entered together, aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed them. The lobby, once familiar to Sarah in her role as Olivia, now felt strangely alien. Emily was waiting for them by the elevators, her face a mask of professionalism with a touch of warmth. "Good morning, welcome to the new Eagle Corporation." As they rode up in the elevator, Emily gave them a quick overview of what they could expect. "We've spent the weekend reorganizing the company structure. Transparency and ethics are now our top priorities, Sarah. You'll be in charge of the new compliance and ethics department. Jack, your experience will be crucial in our internal audit team." Sarah and Jack exchanged a glance. It was strange to be back in this building, but this time with their true identities and purposes. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and there, standing in the hallway, was Nathan. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Nathan's eyes met Sarah's, then moved to Jack. The tension in the air was palpable. Finally, Nathan stepped forward, extending his hand. "Jack, Sarah, thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for any of us, but I deeply appreciate you being here." Jack looked at the extended hand for a moment before taking it in a firm handshake. "We're here to do the right thing, Nathan, for the company, for the people who work here, and for everyone who was affected by the corruption." Sarah nodded, adding, "It's an opportunity for all of us to redeem our mistakes and create something positive." Nathan led them to a conference room where the rest of the executive team was waiting. Over the next few hours, they discussed plans, strategies, and the enormous challenges that lay ahead. As the meeting progressed, Sarah couldn't help but notice the changes in Nathan. The arrogant and self-assured man she had, known as Olivia, had been replaced by someone more humble, more reflective. Every time he spoke, his words were filled with remorse for the past and determination for the future. When the meeting ended and everyone began to leave, Nathan asked to speak with Sarah and Jack privately. With some apprehension, they agreed. "I want you to know," Nathan began, his voice laden with emotion, "that I completely understand if you can never forgive me for my role in all of this. But I am committed to making things right, not just for the company, but for you too." Jack and Sarah exchanged a look before Jack spoke. "Nathan, I'm not going to lie and say this is easy. Part of me is still angry about what happened, but I also believe in second chances. So we're willing to try if you are." Nathan nodded, visibly moved. "I am." Thank you, Sarah, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Nathan, what happened between us was a lie based on a lie," Nathan gently interrupted. "I understand that now, Sarah, and I want you to know that I respect your choice and your love for Jack. My priority now is to be a better man and a better leader." With those words, something seemed to resolve in the air between them. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was a start. The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah, Jack, and Nathan worked tirelessly to transform Eagle Corporation. They implemented new transparency policies, established a rigorous internal audit system, and created compensation programs for those who had been harmed by the corrupt practices of the past. It wasn't easy. There were days of frustration, nights of doubt, and moments when it seemed they were swimming against the current. But little by little, they began to see results. 1 year after the day Sarah and Jack returned to Eagle Corporation, the company was recognized by an independent organization as a model of corporate reform and business ethics. That night, as the team celebrated on the rooftop of the corporate building, Sarah found herself looking at the sunset, Over the city, Jack approached, wrapping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Sarah smiled, leaning back against him. "How much everything has changed. How much we've changed." Jack nodded, kissing her temple. "It's been an incredible journey, and it all started with you risking everything for me." "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," Sarah said, turning to look into his eyes. "I love you, Jack, more than ever." "And I love you," he replied, leaning in to kiss her from across the terrace. Nathan watched them with a mix of emotions. There was a tinge of sadness in his eyes, but also genuine joy for the couple's happiness. Emily approached him, offering him a glass of champagne. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Nathan nodded, taking the glass. "I am, for the first time in a long time, I really am." Emily followed his gaze to Sarah and Jack. "They've been fundamental in all of this, haven't they?" "They have," Nathan agreed. "They taught me the true meaning of love, loyalty, and redemption. I owe them more than I can ever express." As the sun set over the city, bathing the terrace in a warm golden glow, Sarah looked around. She saw Jack, the love of her life, by her side. She saw Nathan and Emily, former adversaries turned allies. She saw her colleagues, all working together for a better future. In that moment, Sarah knew that all the lies, deceptions, and sacrifices had been worth it. They had gone through the fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. As she raised her glass for a toast, Sarah thought about the long and complicated journey that had brought them to this point. It had been a story of love and betrayal, of lies and truths, of falls and redemptions. But above all, it had been a story of hope. And as she looked to the future, Sarah knew that whatever happened, they would face the challenges together. Because in the end, true love, honesty, and determination had triumphed over all adversities. "To a new beginning," Sarah said, raising her glass. "To a new beginning," everyone repeated, their voices blending in the soft night breeze. And so, as the sun set on one chapter of their lives and rose on another, Sarah, Jack, Nathan, and all the others prepared to write the next part of their story together. A story of second chances, of redemption, and of the transformative power of true love. The celebration continued late into the night, filled with laughter, honest conversations, and plans for the future. As they finally began to disperse, Sarah and Jack stayed a moment longer on the terrace, enjoying the tranquility of the night. "You know," Jack said, looking at the city lights, "a year ago when I was in that cell, I never would have imagined we'd be here now." Sarah rested her head on Jack's shoulder. "Me neither." "There were moments when I thought I'd lost you forever." Jack hugged her tighter. "But you didn't. Your love and determination saved us both." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We saved each other, Jack, and now together we're helping to save others." They kissed softly under the starry sky, a kiss that tasted of fulfilled promises and dreams yet to be realized. The next day, as Sarah prepared for another day at the office, she paused for a moment in front of the mirror. She no longer saw Olivia Parker, the imposter she had created to infiltrate Eagle Corporation. Nor did she see the desperate Sarah who had been willing to risk everything to save her husband. Instead, she saw a strong, resilient woman who had gone through the fire and emerged wiser and more compassionate. A woman who had learned that sometimes the path to truth and justice is neither straight nor easy, but it's worth walking. Meanwhile, in his office, Nathan looked at a framed photo on his desk. It was an image of Eagle Corporation's new management team. Himself, Emily, Sarah, Jack, and others who had joined their mission to transform the company. His eyes lingered on Sarah, and he felt a twinge of what could have been. But it was no longer pain he felt, but gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson she had taught him, for the opportunity for redemption she had given him. He took a deep breath and focused on the documents in front of him. Today was the day they would announce their most ambitious project to date, an aid fund for victims of corporate corruption. It was their way of giving back to society, of trying to right the wrongs of the past. As the day progressed, the energy in the office was palpable. Everyone felt they were on the brink of something big, something that could change lives. At the end of the day, Sarah, Jack, Nathan, and Emily gathered for one last review before the big presentation the next day. "This is bigger than all of us," Emily said, looking at the plans spread out on the table. "What we're doing here, it could change the way business is done across the country." Nathan nodded. "It's our chance to leave a positive legacy. A legacy of integrity, transparency, and justice," Jack added. Sarah looked at each of them before speaking. "A year ago, we were all in very different places, Nathan. You were trapped in a corrupt system you had inherited, Jack. You were an innocent victim of that system, and I was willing to do anything to save the man I loved." She paused, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "But look at us now. We've taken all that pain, all that injustice, and transformed it into something beautiful. Something that can make a real difference in the world." The four looked at each other, a moment of understanding passing between them. They had been adversaries, they had been victims and perpetrators, but now they were a team united by a common purpose. "To a better future," Nathan said, extending his hand to the center of the group. "To justice," Jack added, placing his hand on top of Nathan's. "To truth," Emily said, joining her hand to the group. Sarah put her hand on top of all the others. "To love that conquers all." As their hands separated, each felt the weight of the responsibility they carried, but also the strength their union gave them that night. As Sarah and Jack prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, noticing her thoughtful look. Sarah smiled, cuddling up next to him in bed. "About how love can transform everything. Our love gave us the strength to overcome the impossible. And now, that same love is helping to transform an entire company, and maybe even beyond." Jack kissed her, softly. "You're right. Our love was tested in every possible way, but it came out stronger. And now," Sarah continued, "we're using that strength to make the world a better place." They remained silent for a moment, enjoying the peace and intimacy of the moment. "I love you, Sarah," Jack whispered. "More than words can express." "And I love you, Jack," Sarah replied, "always and forever." As they fell asleep in each other's arms, they both knew that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together. Their love, tested by the fire of adversity, was now a beacon of hope, not only for them, but for all those around them. And so, in a city that had once witnessed lies and betrayals, a light of truth and redemption now shone, a light ignited by the transformative power of true love. Epilogue. 5 years later. The auditorium was packed to capacity. Journalists, business people, politicians, and ordinary citizens had gathered to witness a historic moment. On stage, Sarah Thompson, now internationally recognized as a leader in business ethics, prepared to give her opening speech at the first Global Corporate Integrity Summit. By her side was Jack, her rock, her partner in every step of the way. In the front row, Nathan and Emily, now married and leaders of their own anti-corruption foundation, looked at her with pride. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak. "6 years ago, I found myself at a crossroads. I was willing to lie, cheat, and betray my own values to save the man I loved today. I'm here to tell you that even in the darkest moments, there is always a path to the light, a path of truth, integrity, and love." As Sarah continued her speech, sharing her story and the transformation of Eagle Corporation, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the incredible journey they had traveled. From the depths of despair, they had emerged to create a global movement for positive change. As she concluded her speech, Sarah looked at Jack and smiled, a smile that spoke of love, triumph, and a bright future ahead. And so in that moment of triumph, it became clear that their love story had not only survived lies and betrayals, but had become a force for good in the world. A story that demonstrated that with love, courage, and determination, even the most wounded hearts can heal, and the most lost souls can find redemption.